The story goes like this. To kill one man, his enemies needed cyanide, several bullets, a savage beating, and a freezing river, and even then he almost got away. They fed him cakes and wine laced with enough poison to drop a horse, and he shrugged it off. They shot him in the chest, and he got up. They shot him again, wrapped him in a cloth, and pushed him through a hole in the ice, and the legend says he was still alive when the water closed over him. One man, that hard to kill. Except the autopsy found no poison in his body at all. It found no water in his lungs. The most famous death in modern Russian history didn't happen the way you've been told, and neither did most of the life that led up to it. So here's the real question. How did a barely literate peasant from a village in Siberia get close enough to the last throne of Russia that killing him took a conspiracy of princes? Rasputin. He was born in the Siberian village of Pokrovskoye near the Tura River on the 21st of January 1869. Some older accounts give 1872, but modern historians settle on 69. His father Yefim was a peasant farmer and a village church elder. His mother Anna had many children and buried most of them. 7 of Grigori's brothers and sisters died in infancy. He grew up illiterate, like nearly every peasant child in that part of the world, and may only have learned to read and write years later. In 1887 he married a local woman, Praskovia Dubrovina. They had 7 children too, and again most didn't survive. 3 did. Praskovia stayed in that village for the rest of her life, even when her husband's name was known in every palace in the country. And about that name, you've probably heard that Rasputin means the debauched one, a nickname he supposedly earned by his behavior. That's almost certainly false. It was the family's surname from birth, long before any scandal, and linguists trace it to a plain Russian root meaning a crossroads or a place where the roads fork, the kind of ordinary rural surname thousands of peasants carried. Something changed in him around 1897. He left the farm and started walking. Historians aren't sure why. The biographer Douglas Smith says the trip could only have been set off by some kind of emotional or spiritual crisis, and there's a rougher rumor that he was dodging punishment for horse theft, though that one isn't proven. What's certain is that he became a stranik, a wandering holy man, one of the barefoot pilgrims who crossed the Russian countryside on foot from monastery to monastery. At the monastery of Verkhoturi he came under the influence of an elder named Makary. For a time he gave up meat and drink, and by some accounts he walked as far as Mount Athos in Greece. Later, his enemies would accuse him of something much darker, that he joined the Klisti, an underground sect known for secret ecstatic rites. The Orthodox Church investigated him for it more than once. Most historians today don't believe he was ever a member. His own idea, that a person had to sin deeply before they could truly repent, had a surface resemblance to the sect's teaching, and that resemblance was enough for the rumor to take hold. He reached the capital, St. Petersburg, around the end of 1904, carrying letters of introduction from clergymen who'd been struck by his intensity. He walked into a city primed for exactly what he was. The Russian aristocracy of that moment was fascinated with the occult, with mystics and spiritualists and holy men, and a genuine, unpolished peasant with burning eyes was a novelty the drawing rooms hadn't seen. 2 Grand Duchesses, Militsa and Anastasia, sisters from Montenegro who'd married into the Romanov family, became his bridge upward. They brought him to the notice of the imperial couple themselves. On the 1st of November 1905, he met Tsar Nicholas II and his wife Alexandra for the first time. That night, Nicholas wrote a single line in his diary. He'd made the acquaintance, he wrote, of a man of God, Grigori, from Tobolsk province. It was a small note about a minor visitor. It would end, 11 years later, with a bullet in a basement. The reason a wandering peasant could matter to the most powerful family in Russia had a name, and it was a state secret. Alexandra had given Nicholas 4 daughters, and then, in 1904, a son. Alexei, the heir to the throne. The boy had hemophilia, a disorder that stops the blood from clotting properly, carried into the family through Alexandra's line from her grandmother, Queen Victoria. A bruise could bleed inside the body for days. A minor knock could turn into agony that lasted weeks, and any of it could kill him. The whole dynasty rested on this one fragile child, and the imperial family hid his condition from the country almost completely. So a mother watched her only son suffer, could tell almost no one, and was surrounded by the best doctors in Russia, who could do essentially nothing. Into that impossible situation walked a man who said he could help. Everything that came after grew out of it. The turning point came in October 1912 at a hunting lodge called Spala. Alexei, then 8, hurt himself jumping in a bathtub, and a jolting carriage ride afterwards made it far worse. He started bleeding internally near the groin. A huge swelling formed. His temperature climbed past 39 degrees, and he screamed for days on end. The surgeon Sergei Fyodorov examined him and called the situation desperate, putting the boy's chances of recovery at less than 1 in 100. The family began to prepare for his death. In despair, Alexandra had a telegram sent to Rasputin, who was far away in Siberia. His reply came back, and it was strangely calm. God had seen her tears, he said, and heard her prayers. She wasn't to grieve. The little one would not die. And he added one instruction, that she should not let the doctors bother the boy too much. Within about a day, the bleeding eased, and Alexei began to recover. For Alexandra, there was nothing left to argue about. She'd been told her son would die. A man hundreds of miles away had told her he'd live, and he lived. From that day, she trusted Rasputin without limit. So what actually happened at Spala? No serious historian credits a miracle. But the honest answer is that we don't fully know, and the leading explanations are all quietly reasonable. The first is rest. Rasputin's advice was always the same, to keep the doctors away and let the boy lie still, and for haemophilia that's genuinely sound because movement and stress make internal bleeding worse. The second is more specific. Alexei's tutor pointed out afterwards that the doctors had been giving the boy aspirin, which thins the blood and would have made a bleed much harder to stop, and that when Rasputin told them to back off, the aspirin stopped too. The third is calm. Rasputin's message steadied Alexandra's panic, and a calmer mother may well have meant a calmer, more settled child. Rest, a stop drug, a quieted room. Robert Massey, one of the great historians of the family, simply called Spala one of the most mysterious episodes in the whole story. That's the honest verdict. Not magic, and not fully solved either. While the Empress saw a holy man, the rest of the capital was starting to see something else. Rasputin drank heavily and chased women, and this part, in general terms, is documented across many independent accounts. In 1910, a governess named Sofia Tyucheva was horrified to find he had informal run of the rooms of the young Grand Duchesses, the Tsar's daughters, sometimes while the girls were in their nightgowns, and she tried to have him barred. Nicholas wavered. Alexandra had the governess dismissed instead. There were far graver charges too. Another woman in the household, Maria Vishnyakova, accused Rasputin of raping her. Alexandra refused to believe it, and an investigation run by the family's own loyalists claimed to have found the accuser in bed with a palace guardsman, which is exactly the kind of story an interested party would produce. The truth of that accusation has never been settled, and it shouldn't be pretended either way. What is clear is that his enemies were multiplying. In 1914, one of them nearly finished him. A woman named Kiernia Guseva, a follower of a defrocked priest and former ally called Iliador, stabbed Rasputin in the stomach in his home village and very nearly killed him. He survived it. That was 2 years before the murder everyone remembers. The most famous scandal of all came in 1915 at a Moscow restaurant called the Yar. The story you'll read almost everywhere goes like this. Rasputin turned up drunk, exposed himself, danced obscenely, groped the performers, and bragged out loud that he could do whatever he pleased with the Empress, whom he called the old girl. It's a devastating scene. It also probably never happened. The historian Kyle Orton followed the paper trail. The secret police who were shadowing Rasputin that day filed a report noting that he'd gone into the restaurant and noting nothing scandalous whatsoever. No drunken tirade, no exposure, no boasting. Then, 2 months later, a senior official in the Interior Ministry who happened to be Rasputin's political enemy ordered a second, lurid account written up, and that's the version that traveled around the world. The men who produced it reportedly admitted among themselves afterwards that the scene had never taken place. The single most quoted proof of Rasputin's monstrousness was manufactured by a man who wanted him gone, but real damage was being done, and it had nothing to do with restaurants. In August 1915, with the First World War going badly, Nicholas made a fateful choice. He left the capital to take personal command of the army at the front. That left Alexandra effectively running the government at home, and Alexandra leaned on Rasputin. Over the next year, ministers were appointed and sacked at a dizzying rate, a churn that contemporaries mocked as ministerial leapfrog. Two of the men who rose in this period, the Prime Minister Boris Sturmer and the Interior Minister Alexander Protopopov were widely seen as disastrous choices tied to Rasputin's favor. Now, how much of this was really Rasputin and how much was Alexandra's own judgment is genuinely debated, and his hand in any single appointment is hard to prove. But the perception alone was politically lethal. In November 1916, a member of parliament named Vladimir Purishkevich stood up in the Duma and declared that Russia's ministers had been turned into marionettes, their strings held by Rasputin and the Empress, whom he called the evil genius of Russia. Within weeks, Purishkevich would help murder him. The propaganda, meanwhile, ran far ahead of the facts. The most poisonous rumor of all was that Rasputin and the Empress were lovers. Historians reject it almost universally. There's no evidence for it, and Douglas Smith, who wrote the standard modern biography, states plainly that there was no sexual relationship. So why did soldiers in the trenches pass it round as common knowledge? Because Alexandra was a German-born princess in a country at war with Germany, isolated and deeply unpopular, and the rumor gave a frightened, angry public a target. Pornographic cartoons flooded the country, showing Rasputin in bed with the Empress, with her daughters, with her lady-in-waiting, and showing the Tsar and Tsarina as puppets dancing on his strings. Some of the stories were simply mad. One claimed he was trying to start a cholera epidemic in the capital using poisoned apples smuggled in from Canada. As the historians at the Smithsonian put it, what the Russian people thought they knew about Rasputin mattered more than anything he actually did. The myth had grown more powerful than the man. By the end of 1916, a small group of men had decided that the myth was reason enough to kill. The leader was Prince Felix Yusupov, one of the richest men in Russia, married to the Tsar's own niece, Irina. With him were Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, a cousin of the Tsar, and Vladimir Purishkevich, the parliamentarian from that marionette speech, along with an army doctor and an officer. Their motive, as they told it, wasn't ambition. It was rescue. They believed Rasputin was dragging the monarchy toward ruin, that as long as he had Alexandra's ear the dynasty was finished, and that killing him might save it. What they did next became the most famous murder legend of the century. And almost nothing they later said about it was true. Here's the story Yusupov told, the one that filled books and films for 100 years. Late on the night of the 17th of December, he lured Rasputin down to the basement of his palace on the Moika Canal in Petrograd, on the promise of meeting his beautiful wife. He served him cakes and glasses of Madeira wine, all of it laced with potassium cyanide, enough to kill several men. Rasputin ate and drank and felt nothing. Shaken, Yusupov fetched a revolver and shot him in the chest, and Rasputin dropped, apparently dead. Then, Yusupov said, he suddenly reared up, seized his killer by the throat, and lurched out into the courtyard, where the others shot him again and again. This was the devil, Yusupov wrote, a man who had been poisoned, who had a bullet in his heart, and who must have risen from the dead. They wrapped the body, drove it to a bridge, and dropped it through the ice into the river. It's an unforgettable story. And its one and only source is a memoir Yusupov published in exile in 1928, more than a decade after the night when, as one historian dryly puts it, he needed to sell the book. Now, the autopsy. The body was pulled from under the river ice a few days later, and the city's senior surgeon examined it. There was no cyanide in the stomach. There was no poison anywhere in the body, only alcohol. Whatever was in those cakes, if the cakes were even real, it wasn't the poison of the legend. One of the plotters, the doctor, later claimed he'd lost his nerve and swapped the cyanide for a harmless powder, though that is his own account and nobody has ever confirmed it. What the surgeon did find was 3 gunshot wounds. One in the chest, one in the back, and a third, the fatal one, fired point blank into the forehead. That head wound killed him instantly, which means there was no rising from the dead and no supernatural struggle in the courtyard. And his lungs were dry. There was no water in them at all, and that single detail ends the drowning story for good. He was not thrown alive into the river to drown under the ice. He was already dead when he went in. One last thing, since the myth grew a grotesque tale over the years. His body was intact. He was not castrated, whatever the later tales of a preserved relic claimed. The autopsy answered the question the whole legend was built on. It didn't take poison and bullets and drowning to kill him. It took one shot to the head, so who fired that shot? The question opened a door that still isn't shut. One theory points across Europe, to British intelligence. A man named Oswald Rayner was a British Secret Service officer stationed in Russia, and he happened to be an old Oxford friend of Felix Yusupov. The argument runs that Britain feared Rasputin might push Russia into a separate peace with Germany and pull it out of the war, and that Rayner was there in the basement and fired the killing shot himself. Supporters point to a forensic reading of that forehead wound that suggests a British-made revolver, and to hints in later letters and family recollection. But the strongest voice here cuts the other way. Professor Keith Jeffrey, the historian given full access to the real Secret Service archive to write its official history, went looking and found no documentary evidence that Rayner or any British agent had a hand in the killing. So it sits there, genuinely unresolved, a theory built on ballistics and rumour against an archive that stays silent. On the evidence we actually have, the British hand is unproven. There's one final legend, and it's the eeriest of all. Rasputin is supposed to have written a letter to the Tsar not long before he died, predicting not only his own killing, but that if it was nobles who did it, the imperial family would all be dead within 2 years. It's a chilling prophecy, and it appears to be an invention. The letter didn't surface until the 1920s, and its only source is the memoir of Rasputin's secretary, a man historians treat as unreliable, with no trace of the letter before the events it supposedly foretold had already come true. But here's the thing. The real history didn't need it. In July 1918, about a year and a half after Rasputin's murder, Bolshevik revolutionaries took Nicholas, Alexandra, and all 5 of their children down into a cellar in Yekaterinburg and shot them. The dynasty that had ruled Russia for 3 centuries ended in that room. And Rasputin himself didn't rest easy. After the Tsar fell, his body was dug up and burned, so his grave couldn't become a shrine. The truth was already dramatic enough. It never needed a forged letter to make the point. So what was he, really? Not the sorcerer of the cartoons, and not the demon who couldn't be killed. He was a Siberian peasant with a real gift for calming a frightened, desperate family, who gave sound if simple advice about a very sick boy, and who then drank and boasted and made enemies until those enemies painted him as a monster and finally shot him in a cellar. Almost everything you think you know about him, the poison he survived, the affair with the Empress, the meaning of his name, the sect, the drunken restaurant scene, is myth, and a lot of it was invented on purpose, by people with their own reasons to invent it. The strangest part is that the real story, and nobody who walked out of Siberia and ended up close enough to a doomed throne to be worth murdering, is stranger and sadder than any of the lies. The lies just traveled faster. They usually do. If you had to guess, how much of what you'd heard about him before today do you think was actually true? Tell me in the comments.